Craniosynostosis. Now that long, scary 16-letter word first entered my dictionary the day my daughter was born. And it's been 4 years, but I'm finally at the point where I'm beginning to think that I'm starting to get ahead of the learning curve. But the biggest question that I've received as I've started to talk and blog about what it means to be a Cranio dad, it goes along the lines of this. Craniosyno what? What does that even mean? And I've been asked that question a lot, and I decided that it was high time that a person try to put it into terms that anybody can understand. So let's talk about what craniosynostosis means and take a look at how it affects children, as well as later on we'll look at how it affects the families. Now, breaking a word into its roots is always a good place to start. So we start with cranio, which comes from cranium, which means the skull, and then syn, which means together, and ostosis, which relates to bone. Now, like I said, that's a good place to start, but it's merely scratching the surface. And I'm going to do what a lot of people have done when they first hear the word, and they turn to Wikipedia for the all-knowing definitions of all things that we don't understand. So the definition from Wikipedia is a condition in which one or more of the fibrous sutures in an infant's skull prematurely fuses, turning into bone, ossification, hereby changing the growth pattern of the skull because the skull cannot expand perpendicular to the fused suture. It compensates by growing more in the direction parallel to the closed suture. Now, that's only part of the definition that Wikipedia gives. It actually goes on and on to talk about abnormal shaping and some of the issues and issues with the brain not growing and ways to help diagnose it. But imagine reading that definition for the very first time while you're sitting in the NICU next to your newborn child. Not really helpful, right? Now, the Mayo Clinic has gone a step further, and their definition is actually a lot better, I think, in some aspects. And the definition that the Mayo Clinic gives for craniosynostosis is a birth defect in which one or more of the joints between the bones of your baby's skull close prematurely before your baby is fully formed. When your baby has craniosynostosis, his or her brain can't grow in its natural shape, and the head is misshapen. Okay, that is better. Kind of. Now, I need you to understand that my wife and I both have degrees in biology. I've also spent 5 years in the medical field prior to my daughter even being born. And when I first heard craniosynostosis and I first read some of these definitions, my mind just melted in the NICU. You can call it the stress of being in the NICU. You can call it the stress of being a brand new dad. You can call it the stress of being separated from my wife while she was recovering and I was trying to take care of our baby. But regardless, the definition really didn't tell me anything. And in fact, in some ways, it scared me even more. So having walked through the nightmare that is beginning to understand what craniosynostosis is, that's why I'm doing this. Now, through the magic of YouTube, I'm going to be able to show you a lot more about what craniosynostosis is. So this is what a newborn skull should look like. Okay, it's a little bit bigger and it's also a cantaloupe. However, it's going to serve the purpose that I'm trying to do here. And these things right here, these spaces, those are the sutures that the Mayo Clinic is talking about. So here and here on the back, you can see the soft spots that we all know that babies are supposed to have. You know, those things that we don't want to drop them on. These spots are called the fontanelles. They're created by the spaces between all of these plates, which help protect the brain, and the spaces are what allow the brain to grow at a crazy rate that it does when we are babies. These two plates up here are called the frontal. These two back here I'll call the parietal, and the one in the very, very back is called the occipital. Craniosynostosis affects these spaces between these plates. Because they are not there, the baby's brain cannot grow properly. So let's talk about these things called the sutures. The very front suture that runs right down the front of the skull is called the metopic. It usually closes or fuses somewhere between 3 and 9 months of age. These two sutures here are called the coronal. There's one on the left and one on the right. This suture begins to fuse somewhere around 24 years of age, but it is not complete until nearly 40 years old. Run right down the top center of the skull. This is the sagittal suture. It usually closes somewhere between 30 and 40 years old. Then across the back is the lambdoid. This suture may never fully close, which is called obliteration, but it usually does somewhere between the ages of 30 and 45. Now, any part of these can join at any point in time before the child is born, and that's what craniosynostosis is. It's when these joints fuse before the child's born, long before they're supposed to. Now, let's talk about why I know so much about craniosynostosis and exactly what my daughter has going on. My daughter has bicoronal craniosynostosis. That means that both sides of her coronal suture were fused at birth. So, when she was born, she looked a little something like this. As you can see, both of her coronal sutures are fused. That means the bone is already there. Now, she's had a lot of surgeries to get her where she is today, and by no means does that mean that she's done. But at least her brain's been able to grow to accommodate her, and we've seen no real negative effects from it. But ever since I first saw her, she's been this most beautiful, vibrant spark of life. She is the perfect embodiment of my heart living outside my body. I would have it no other way than to be a Cranio dad. I've learned a lot, not just about strength, but also about patience from my daughter, and it should really be the other way. But I've watched her go through these surgeries and recover, and she's done better than my wife or I have. So I hope that this video has helped you in some way, shape, or form to understand a little bit about what craniosynostosis is. I know it's a really long, scary word, but I'm really trying my best to make sure that you can see from a Cranio dad standpoint, from a parent, from a person, not a doctor, not a textbook, not Wikipedia, what craniosynostosis is and how it affects the human skull. So don't be afraid to like and share. Subscribe to my YouTube channel for more videos like this. I'm going to be doing a very long series about all the things involving craniosynostosis. And thanks for watching. And remember, you don't know how strong you truly are until you didn't have a choice.